welcome back to another exciting episode on the show, Control or Be Controlled, a podcast designed to help you start thinking differently and take control of your life. And I remain your host, Darlington. Our guest today is Olaolu Ogunyemi. Olaolu, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation. I appreciate you for reaching out. And I'm ready to dive in.
All right, so I would like you to introduce yourself to my audience.
Sure. As you pronounced my name already, and we sort of laughed in the pre-show that my dad actually immigrated from Nigeria to the United States, where he raised us. I was the fifth of six children, and we had a large family, and I love it because that's really who I am. I mean, I'm a family man. I love teams. I love being in environments where we get to encourage each other. And honestly, my family, we still talk every day. And I have a family of my own now. I have a wife and three children. I have a 16-year-old girl. I have a 12-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl. And I joined the Marine Corps approximately almost 14 years ago now. And I've been an officer in the Marine Corps ever since. I was in the reserves for a little bit, and then I've been active duty. And I've been active duty and really doing information technology in the Marine Corps for the last almost 14 years. While in the Marine Corps, I decided I was going to become an author, and I published my first children's books. So I have 3 children's books under my Parent-Child Connect series. And then I decided I wanted to continue to impact the next generation of impactful leaders. So I wrote my first leadership book, and I started coaching and mentoring leaders. And so this has been really what I've been in the space. I'm always trying to find ways to influence the next generation. I love meeting new people. That's why I love talking on these podcasts and having these great conversations with people like you. So I'm looking forward to meeting more people through your platform and meeting your audience, hopefully in the future.
Okay, thank you so much. So I have some questions here for you.
Okay.
You talk a lot about leading last. Tell us what that means and why is it so important in today's world?
Absolutely. So lead last, there's 3 things that I always try to emphasize when we're talking about lead last. Number 1, I talk about sequence. In other words, what we're saying is that you don't always have to be the loudest voice in the room. You don't always have to have all the answers. In fact, what I'm encouraging people is to become a servant leader. That means that at times you may be behind your team, pushing them forward to give them the motivation they need to get a project across the finish line. Or perhaps you're beneath your team, lifting them up so they get the recognition instead of you. But that's really what lead last is all about. It's about finding yourself in the best position to resource your team. Secondly, we talk about preparation. In order for us to be effective leaders, there are things that we should do first. And that's why I say lead last. So the things I say is you should get to know yourself, get to know those you're leading, and understand how you're going to lead the environment and create a culture of self-starters and innovators. That's what I always encourage people to understand. And so those are the things that we want to do first before we can become effective leaders. And if we apply all these principles, the next thing is durability. So when we're talking about durability, that means that we are doing these things so that way we have an impact that lasts beyond our tenure with the organization or our time here on earth. So that's what lead last is all about. It's about finding ways to ensure that our legacy is what I'm just referring to. Our legacy lasts beyond our tenure. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about lead last.
All right. So
always
your children's book, Crow from the Shadow, was born from a very personal place. Tell us what inspired it and how has it impacted your own parenting journey?
Yeah, so Crow from the Shadow really came from a place of me trying my best to figure out like the things that are truly that are impacting me, stopping me from wanting to achieve what I was meant to be on this earth for. And so I say that because, things like we already talked about, like my name, I was very ashamed. I didn't want to introduce myself to people because I felt like they're going to make fun of my name. They're not going to want to talk to me. They were going to make fun of the gap in my mouth. They're going to make fun of my weight or whatever else. So there's so many insecurities that were piled up that I was like, man, there's these things that are trying to stop me from achieving my purpose. And so when I thought about Crow from the Shadow as an adult, what I was trying to do is find a way for parents to sit down with children in a way that they could share a sort of fun story. It rhymes and it flows well, but share this story to where they can identify what the shadow is in their lives. Like I've identified a few for myself already, but when we go through the story, the hope is that when parents are sitting down with their children, they're able to identify what those shadows may be, and they can help them grow through and defeat those shadows. And that's really what it's all about. And that's why I changed my parenting. Really what it did is it taught me that we all have our own insecurities, and we all have these shadows that come against us that try to stop us from achieving our purpose. But we got to stay focused. And it helped me to understand how to articulate to my children and start a conversation with them that doesn't have to be in depth. It doesn't have to be a lecture, which, of course, as a dad, I can definitely lecture with the best of them. But it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be a lecture. It should be an open communication between you and the child based on what they perceive to be the shadow. So that's what Crow from the Shadow is, and how it's inspired, and really how it's made me better as a father, because my children have now taught me by using that book.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, why you had all these insecurities. How were you able to cope with these insecurities as at that time?
Yeah, great question. And so, why I had insecurities was legitimately because, I feel like I was allowing the things that I heard, not even the most, but I heard consistently, to start to identify me. And I say that because, let's use the name, for example. When people come up to you and they don't even try to pronounce your name, it sort of becomes this thing where they're like, you walk up to shake their hand and introduce yourself, and they're like, what is your name? Oh my gosh, I would never be able to say that. And when you start hearing those things, it's like, man, it doesn't feel good, and so you add that, and you start having the things where with your weight, and you start having the things with, how you're acting, how you sound, and the list goes on and on. And so even if your parents, which they were, and my family were encouraging me, and I had coaches and mentors around me that were encouraging me, there are people who are out there that are saying things, children and adults alike, that were saying things that became trends. And because I started to believe in those trends, I started to accept those negative things instead of listening to the positive around me. Now, here's the key. How was I able to cope with it? And how was I able to overcome those insecurities and start to grow and develop? Because the adults around me, my siblings, and some of my peers never gave up. They remained consistent. And at some point, all those positive things, I began to see stuff. When you have that light bulb go off for yourself, I think that's the most important part. But because it was somebody was saying that. They said, hey, you're going to be a great businessman one day. They kept saying that you have a beautiful smile that light brightens up the room and all these things. And they kept saying these things, even though people were saying opposite stuff, they were saying these things. And over time, the second I saw it for myself, all the things that they said made sense over the years. And I think that's how I was able to not just cope, but to learn how to face my insecurities. And as an adult, I started looking back at those moments and looking back at those insecurities and really taking inventory of them. I think that's what it's about. It's about understanding what your insecurities are, and then understanding what the cues are that trigger those insecurities. So that way you're prepared when they do surface themselves. I don't think you can truly overcome them, but I do believe that you can continue to grow through them to be effective at what you're doing.
All right. So, what practical advice do you have for parents who wants to raise resilient, emotionally healthy kids in a chaotic world?
Yeah, so the thing I would tell parents, and I love talking about this topic because some parents look at me like this guy's crazy, but I always tell people, set your children up to fail. Now, I say that, and I know this sounds crazy, and I hope that everybody didn't just turn their radio off or turn their podcast off as soon as I said that, because let me explain. What I believe is in our houses, we have a safe space where we could fail. It's no different from any coach out there. When coaches are really trying to teach their players how to play a game, how to play whatever sport it may be, what they do is they sit down with them and they push them to the point of where they feel like they're going to break, and they allow them to fail in practice so that they can learn how to bounce back. They can learn how to play beyond what it normally would be 4 quarters or maybe 2 halves or whatever it may be. They have them practice longer than that time. They have them do more things so that way they're actually prepared. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to create scenarios for our children within our home that allow them to fail. So that way we can mentor them and guide them through what it feels like. Let them go through those emotions of what failure feels like with our safety, like they have us as a backstop, with our ability to help mentor them and coach them through it. So that way they're not going to feel like they are, on their own. So the first time they face failure in my model is in your home, and they should fail it multiple times. You should give them projects that seem just above their ability to complete it. So that way they can go all the way up to where they're capable and then finally learn how to ask for help. And that's what you want them to do. Let them struggle a little bit. And don't just go save the day. Don't stand over their shoulder and micromanage them as they do it. I think that's the way that we build resilient children. And honestly, once they get it, that's how you build confidence too. You build confidence in their ability when you allow them to really work through these problems and then hopefully solve these problems. So that's the recommendation I have. Let your children fail. And I believe that by letting them fail in the safe space of your home, you are able to help them become more resilient and confident children.
Okay, so Olaolu, I'm just wondering, have you been able to give this advice to your parents?
To my parents?
Yes.
Oh yeah. So I talked to my parents about, in fact, that's where I got it from. My parents would give us all kinds of projects, and they would just let us figure it out. There was no, I think this is where I really got it from. Did my parents ever say those words? No. But they 100% would let us just figure stuff out. And in fact, the way it sounded growing up, and I'm sure a lot of people out there listening can relate to this. When I asked my parents, hey, what does this mean? My dad will go tell me, go look it up. Because we had dictionaries, we had encyclopedias from A to Z. We had all these things. And he'll say, go look it up. And I'm like, man, that is such a hassle for me to go find the encyclopedia. I got to pull it down. I have to read about this. But what that did, though, is it taught me to be resourceful. It taught me how to learn. And then when I'm failing over and over and my mom is standing over me trying to teach me how to crease pants, it taught me how to have attention to detail. It taught me when I finally got it, how to celebrate myself and feel good about my accomplishments. But I would never have learned that stuff if they just did everything for me. And that's the truth. I 100% believe my parents, they may not have ever said, set us up to fail, and that they set us up to fail. I guarantee they wouldn't say that. But I will say they 100% put us in scenarios in our home where we had to learn and fail and learn and fail.
Okay. So you said you would have ended up in prison if it weren't for some key influences in your life. What happened during the time there you would have ended up in prison, and how were you able to navigate all that through those influences?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really what was happening, and we've talked a lot about insecurities, but what was happening is I was just trying to find myself. I was trying to find where I belonged. And frankly, I had some friends growing up who would give me that belonging. They made me feel like I was a part of something. They made me feel like I was a part of a crew, a group. And frankly, all these guys, they would do stuff and we'll get in trouble. They'll get in trouble. And what happened is they ended up continuing on that path. And the thing that separated them from me wasn't that I was so smart or that I was such an angel or that I did something that was so great. The fact was that my communities just spent so much time and effort investing in me that eventually it clicked. And that's really the big thing. It clicked for me because, instead of having to go out with them or trying to find my identity somewhere else, I was able to find my identity in one of the many extracurricular activities that my parents put me in, whether it be jump rope, whether it be basketball, football, you name it. Like we had all of it. Drill team at my church, crocheting, cooking. It didn't matter. Like there were so many things for us to be a part of that we always were busy doing something. And because we were always busy doing something, it was really hard for me not to be able to say, okay, this is what I feel like I'm a part of a new group, I'm a new crowd. And I think that's really the things that I recommend to parents as you continue to try to find ways to influence your children. Always try to curate an environment around them to where they can be a part of something. Because if you don't, they're going to find their way out to be a part of something that you may not agree with. I mean, and the other part of that is that I was blessed in that my father and my mother had a good job. And unfortunately, some of my buddies didn't have that. And that's something else that doesn't get talked about enough. It's, providing the opportunities to the community is what we need to be doing, because some of those things that those guys were doing were just straight economic based, and we can judge them and we know it's wrong. But at the end of the day, it's based on the economy. Somebody has to keep the lights on, has to keep food on the table. And the way they were doing it was wrong, but the way that they had to make ends meet in some way. And I think that's really when it boils down to it. I was blessed to have a community around me who wanted to pay me. And I had we call him Papa, but he wasn't my real grandfather. In fact, I didn't meet either of my grandfathers because they passed before I was born or when I was very young. But at the same time, the man who stood in as my grandfather, he would always bring guys over and he would pay them cash to do whatever. He would find work for them to do. And just that little stuff, things like that makes the difference in people's lives. And I truly believe that it made a difference in my life because that was just the things that people decided to do in my life. And I truly believe that if we continue to invest in others, then it'll make the difference in others' lives as well.
Let's talk about insecurity. How can leaders or even parents grow through insecurity instead of being ruled by it?
Yeah, so the reason that so many people are ruled by insecurity is because they don't even identify it. That's the hard part. Because it's not like insecurity just comes up and it's it's a blatantly obvious thing that happens. In many cases, it's been a part of our lives for so long that we don't even recognize that what's being caused and what's causing the issues and the decisions and sometimes good and bad decisions that we're making. But that's really the biggest thing. We have to number one, start by identifying that insecurity. And I'll give an example. One of the ways that I identify one of my insecurities is by using the 5 whys technique. Except I don't use it just saying why. I usually ask the question, why does this matter to me? And so when something happens, let's say I get cut off in traffic, what I realized is that if I ask the question, why does it matter to me? I certainly realized that it's not necessarily the guy cut me off in the car that's what I'm really mad at. Although that's the cue that happened. That's not really what I'm upset with. What I'm upset with is maybe that somebody's taking advantage of me. Maybe I was supposed to be next in line and I felt like that it was my turn and this guy cut me. This guy now took advantage of me because I waved one other guy out and this guy decides to come out in front of me. And so now really it's starting to uncover that. So if I say, why does this matter to me 5 times? Eventually I start to realize that my insecurity may be that I don't like being taken advantage of. And so every time I make a decision or I have something that comes out of that's negative out of my mouth, perhaps it's because that insecurity is rearing its ugly head. And that's what I always tell people. So first of all, identify the insecurity. Second of all, understand that insecurity is not just some thing that we're going to defeat. I always used to say overcome insecurity, and I probably slip up and still say it. But I stopped saying that because I want people to understand that you can't overcome it. It's not just a hurdle that you jump over, an obstacle you jump over, you never see again. Insecurities are going to be there for the remainder of your life. It's going to always be there. The thing that we're trying to do, though, is we're trying to learn how to respond to our insecurities in a positive way. That means that if I feel like people are taking advantage of me and I see myself about to act out to it, or I understand the cues that are going to lead to that feeling, then now I know how to stop it before I react in the way that I don't want to react. I want to make sure I'm being intentional about my reactions. That doesn't mean that it doesn't feel like I have that insecurity anymore. That just simply means that now I know how to react more positively to that insecurity or to the cues that are associated with that insecurity. So that's what I really recommend. I try to get people to really find that deep dive into what the insecurity is. You face it, you write it down, you give it a name, and you don't just let it be something that controls your life without even examining what the problem may be.
Okay, so if there's one thing you hope listeners will walk away after this conversation, what would you want that to be?
Yeah, if there's one thing that I want listeners to do, listen, I just want you to do something because one of the things that I hate about listening to podcasts or reading books and whatever else, watching movies or documentaries, is that we watch it, we listen, and then we don't apply it. That's what I want. I encourage everybody to do something with the information you're receiving. If you have a thought that resonated with you today, or you have this idea, now you have a way that you want to go forward, or perhaps you say, I want to inspire somebody else. I'm motivated. That crazy guy just started running his mouth. He's motivated me to go out and go try to change somebody's life. Okay, go do it. Whatever your thing is, if you're a cook, invite somebody else and teach them how to cook. Or if you see somebody on the street, a young child, go encourage them and say, man, you're wonderful, man. You look special. Give them a high five or fist bump or something. Like, do something. That's really what I want people to take away, because I feel like there's in our communities now, our villagers are becoming weak. Why? Because we're surrounded by apprehension. We're not doing anything. We're surrounded by complainers who are just complaining and not doing anything. We're surrounded by people who really, really want to do something, but they're not doing anything. So if there's anything I want you to take away from this conversation, is that you just do something.
Okay, Olaolu, thank you so much. This has been a very wonderful episode. I must say, what you are doing is very, very purposeful. Honestly, from your own experiences, you're trying to help other people. So I'd like to ask you, what does your other siblings and your parents think about what you are doing? Is there anyone who is on the same path
Let me
with you?
tell you, no,
Let's
no,
just
no.
say.
My parents and siblings, man, I'm like the least of them. That's the way I look at it. And I know they'll probably say the same thing, but I mean, seriously, they are doing some phenomenal stuff. And I can brag about them all day, but I'm not gonna. I won't bore your patience with that. But I will tell you that they're huge supporters of what I'm doing. I can tell you that I talk to my dad, if not every day, every other day. In fact, he's probably going to send me a message soon to say that he hasn't heard from me. He usually likes to say, "Hey, stranger," because he hadn't heard from me in like a day. And so they're very encouraging. They're very supportive. But they also are very well accomplished, and they have been doing things to change the next generation in many different ways, whether it be in finance, whether it be like my dad just retired from Grambling State University in the Department of Educational Leadership. And my mom, she's been doing phenomenal stuff. Even now, she's in Massachusetts doing some phenomenal stuff with the state of Massachusetts. And my siblings, I mean, in every state they're in, whether it be in science or math or in finance or marketing and branding, or my little brother who's in networking, literally just got his PhD. I told you, I'm like the run of the family when it comes to accomplishments and things that they're doing. But I will say that they are very supportive and they're doing some phenomenal things in their own rights.
All right, thank you so much, Olaolu. So, for those who would like to learn more about what you do and get your book, how can they do that?
Yeah, so the best way to learn more about me, get the books or anything else is you go to parent-child-connect.com. You'll see my blog. You'll see my YouVersion content partnership with the YouVersion Bible app. You'll see all kinds of my books and free resources. You'll find all the ways to connect with me on social media and my contact form. I love for people to reach out to me. That's one of my favorite things about doing these conversations and about any of the outreach I do is people reaching out and just asking me questions or connecting with me. Again, that's on parent-child-connect.com.
All right, thank you so much. This has been a very, very wonderful episode. Honestly, thank you so much. I love what you are doing, and I really wish you the best, and I wish you success
You're
as well.
awesome.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you so much for
Olaolu.
having me.
And all right, and to my audience as well, you guys are always amazing. Make sure to share this episode with someone out there who might need to hear this. Once again, I will see you guys on the next episode. Bye, guys. Thank you, Olaolu.
Thank you.